You are coming to the latest information, the most notable current events on the YouTube channel of Nghe An Newspaper, the digital infrastructure of the newspaper and Nghe An radio and television. To know what the program is about today, please follow along below.
Recently, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Portugal have become the first major Western economies to recognize the State of Palestine. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Canadian Prime Minister MCE made this announcement just before the opening of the United Nations General Assembly debate in New York. Other Western nations such as France and Belgium are also expected to follow suit despite warnings from Israel. On the 22nd, the United Nations General Assembly held a special summit on the war in the Gaza Strip. This is a continuation of the diplomatic initiative led by France and Saudi Arabia to promote the restoration of the two-state solution, in which Israel and Palestine coexist side by side as the only way out of the decades-long conflict. Most recent European statements on recognizing the State of Palestine stem from the ongoing Israeli military campaign in Gaza, which has now resulted in many casualties. What the recognition of the State of Palestine can achieve is to further strengthen the call for a ceasefire within the framework of existing international diplomatic, administrative, and legal institutions. In the fall 2025 issue of the academic journal The Cairo Review of Global Affairs, Egyptian political analyst Oma noted that Palestinian officials had sought to join the Geneva Conventions in 1989 but were rejected by Switzerland on the grounds that there was still uncertainty about the existence of a Palestinian state. In Nomi Bayop, a peace negotiator at the Thieves Center for Security Policy, told DW that recognition does not change anything immediately, but it gives Palestine a much higher status in negotiations. Because then the negotiating table is between two states, which is very different from a state negotiating with an entity not yet recognized as a state. Bilateral recognition can be seen as a form of diplomatic upgrade. Countries that proceed with recognition, such as France or Belgium, will be forced to review their relations with Palestine as well as assess their legal obligations to this entity. Therefore, according to some opinions, this step could also lead to a review of relations with Israel. For example, the United Kingdom's official recognition of Palestine as a state has acknowledged all the rights and legal obligations of a sovereign state. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy said this move has no immediate impact but will maintain hope for a two-state solution in which Palestine coexists with Israel. The British government now refers to the West Bank and Gaza as Palestinian rather than occupied Palestinian territory and has made changes across its official website. This move means that, from the British perspective, Palestine will have full diplomatic rights and official representation. The British Foreign Office said Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper would soon send a letter to her Palestinian counterpart at an appropriate time to outline the process of establishing full diplomatic relations. Currently, the Palestinian Authority's mission in the UK is not at embassy level but operates as a diplomatic mission located in Hammersmith, West London. Embassy status will grant these missions protection and privileges under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, although the actions of Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Portugal have attracted global attention and received extensive coverage in newspapers. Analysts told Anzera that this is only a small symbolic step in a context where the Palestinian people are still suffering injustice, facing casualties, and being forced to leave their homes. Bill Lovat, a senior research fellow at the Middle East and North Africa program at the European Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, acknowledged that this recognition is largely symbolic. He said, but symbolism is not always a bad thing. For the countries leading the way in recognition, especially France and the UK, this is an important reaffirmation of the rights of Palestinians and their right to self-determination, the right to live freely without occupation, and the right to have a state. However, he emphasized that symbolic measures must be accompanied by substantive action. Raida Abarat, a Palestinian political scientist, spoke with Anzera. In this case, recognition is significant because close allies of the US have always maintained that recognition would occur after a negotiated agreement. According to him, regarding the impact, Israel will now be more isolated. At a press conference in Brussels on the 18th, the EU Commissioner for Foreign Policy, Kes Canlat, encouraged member states to increase scrutiny of certain Israeli goods and impose sanctions on settler groups and two senior Israeli politicians. Expert Lovat said that just 3 years ago, recognition would probably have been the end of the story, but I think that because public opinion and political stances have changed dramatically, the question is no longer about recognizing Palestine or doing something else. Currently, amidst many measures being promoted, Mr. Lovat also believes that this reflects a shift in public opinion since 2023. Analyst Lovat said that recognition should be seen as a journey. Perhaps we won't achieve it tomorrow, but the direction is clear.
On September 21st, the Venezuelan government released a letter from President Nicolas Maduro to his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, sent earlier this month, a few days after the U.S. military raided a boat believed to be carrying drugs in the Caribbean SEMR. Maduro rejected the U.S. accusations against Venezuela on the drug issue. Mr. Maduro wrote that this was the most convenient falsehood launched against Venezuela with the aim of escalating tensions and possibly leading to a military conflict that would damage the entire continent. He also called on the U.S. leader to maintain peace and equal dialogue. President Zola hopes that his U.S. counterpart will join the dialogue against the fake news that is disturbing the relationship that should be historic and peaceful. Mr. Maduro affirmed that Venezuela is a country without drugs, emphasizing that only 5% of the drugs produced in neighboring Colombia are smuggled into Venezuelan territory. However, since President Maduro's letter was sent, the U.S. military has blown up 2 more boats suspected of transporting drugs for Venezuela. The 3 raids have left a total of 17 people dead. Meanwhile, on March 21st, the Dominican Republic's National Drug Control Agency, DNCD, said it had seized 377 packages of cocaine from a speedboat destroyed by the U.S. military in the Caribbean Sea, about 150 kilometers south of the country's island of last week. The Dominican Navy, in coordination with U.S. forces, located and intercepted the vessel after assessing that the suspects were attempting to bring a ton of drugs to the Dominican Republic and use the country as a conduit to transport the drugs to the U.S. DNCD spokesman Carlos Laver confirmed that this is the first time in history that the U.S. and the Dominican Republic have conducted a joint operation to combat drug terrorism in the Caribbean. Dominican Republic officials have not released images of the drug packages seized from the speedboat. The spokesman for the U.S. Embassy in Dominica confirmed that the drug boat in the DNCD statement was the 3rd vehicle that was blown up by U.S. forces in the Caribbean. The images and information were released by President Donald Trump on May 19th. In the past month, the Trump administration has deployed many warships and aircraft to the waters south of Kyiv to serve the campaign to prevent drug trafficking. The U.S. Secretary of State Mark Rubio announced on May 3rd that the method of intercepting drug boats for many years has been ineffective. This American will blow up the target instead of chasing it. After a period of tension and back and forth, the president knew that Donald Trump and billionaire M suddenly appeared together at a public event, marking the first direct conversation between the two since their relationship deteriorated. Accordingly, at the memorial service for activist Chuck Litter on September 21st, President Trump and billionaire M sat together in a private room in a normal situation throughout the ceremony. Mr. Trump also seemed to introduce Mr. M to Dana, CEO of the Ultimate Fighting Championship UFC. This is the first time the U.S. president and Elon M appeared together in public since the two broke out in a fierce exchange about the Trump administration's big law a few months ago. The U.S. media assessed the reunion between the two as a sign of a thaw in personal disagreements, saying this could affect the Republican Party, the MAGA movement, and the technology industry's relationship with the Trump administration. During the memorial service for Chicas, President Trump expressed his condolences for the 31-year-old activist, affirming that America has lost one of its brightest lights. He said he was a giant of his generation, but above all, he was a husband, a father, a family man, a devoted Christian, and a patriot. Billionaire M also expressed his honor to join tens of thousands of people attending the memorial service. Mr. M was a close ally after investing a large sum of money in Mr. Trump's election campaign and was tasked with cutting government spending. The relationship between President Trump and the billionaire has deteriorated, and they disagreed on the big bill, a budget and tax cut bill, culminating in a dispute and personal attacks on social media on June 5th. Mr. M later called President Trump and wrote that he regretted some of his posts that went too far. The U.S. leader also denied that he wanted to destroy Mr. Muse's businesses after the dispute, stressing that he wanted them to grow stronger than ever.
On September 21st, a group of U.S. congressmen made a rare trip from China. During a meeting with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the artist stressed the need for the world's two largest economies to strengthen cooperation and work together to break the ice in relations that have been strained for years. This is considered an important step as both superpowers have expressed their desire to bring relations back on track. According to Reuters news agency, this trip is also the first official visit by a U.S. House delegation to China since 2019. The COVID-19 pandemic not only prevented congressional visits in 2020 but also contributed to a difficult period in bilateral relations when Washington and Beijing were at loggerheads over the origin of the coronavirus. The trip took place just 2 days after a phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is in the context that both countries are looking to escape the long-standing confrontation over a series of issues from trade disputes, U.S. restrictions on semiconductors, security concerns related to TikTok to military and maritime activities in the East Sea as well as the Taiwan issue, according to information released by the U.S. Embassy in China. Premier Li Qiang affirmed that this trip has the meaning of breaking the ice, contributing to promoting bilateral relations in a more substantial and stable direction. According to Xinhua news agency, Premier Li Qiang noted that China and the U.S. are major countries with significant global influence, so maintaining stable, healthy and sustainable development in bilateral relations serves the common interests of both sides and meets the expectations of the international community. The House delegation was led by Congressman Adam Smith, a member of the Democratic Party, a former chairman and current senior member of the House Armed Services Committee. The agency plays an important role in overseeing the Department of Defense and the U.S. Armed Forces. Mr. Smith said that both China and the U.S. need more direct exchanges and that waiting 6 years for a visit from the U.S. House of Representatives is too long. Hopefully, this trip will open more channels of dialogue to break the silence in bilateral relations. Observers believe that the visit of the U.S. House of Representatives delegation to Beijing in September is a positive signal showing efforts to reduce tensions and re-establish dialogue bridges. However, the core disagreements between the two countries from technology trade to geopolitical issues remain. Therefore, the prospect of U.S.-China relations improving or not still depends largely on whether both sides can truly restrain themselves and seek common interests in the coming time.
On September 21st, the Taliban government in Afghanistan rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's ultimatum to hand over the Bram Air Base to Washington, saying it violated the 2020 U.S.-Taliban agreement on withdrawal. Deputy spokesman for the Taliban government, Hamdullah Fisha, said Kabul has always stressed to Washington that independence and territorial integrity are paramount. Mr. Fatt cited the Doha Agreement. Accordingly, the U.S. pledged not to use or threaten force against the territorial integrity or political independence of Afghanistan, nor to interfere in its internal affairs, Mr. Fatt emphasized that instead of repeating failed approaches of the past, there should be a policy based on reality and reason. Previously, writing on the social network Go, President Trump warned that bad things would happen if Afghanistan did not hand over control of the Bram Air Base on Afghan territory to the U.S. Bad things will happen if Afghanistan does not return Bram Air Base to the people who built it, the United States, Trump wrote, without giving details of what action he would take. Bram Air Base, located in Pagwan province, about 60 kilometers from the capital Kabul, has been the main U.S. military hub in Afghanistan for 2 decades. Under the 2020 Doha Agreement, the U.S. agreed to gradually withdraw troops from Afghanistan and not threaten the country's political independence. In return, the Taliban pledged not to let Afghan territory become a haven for terrorist groups. Since then, the Taliban have said they are willing to cooperate with the U.S., but have not accepted any U.S. military presence in Afghanistan.